It was 1:43 a.m. when Sarah Mitchell first noticed the man in the silver Ford Taurus circling the gas station parking lot for the third time, his headlights cutting through the February fog that had settled over Route 9 just outside Bakersfield, California, and something in her gut, that primal instinct her father had always told her to trust, told her this wasn't right. She was alone behind the counter at the Stop and Go, the only employee willing to take the graveyard shift for an extra $2 an hour, and the fluorescent lights above her hummed their steady drone while the coffee machine gurgled in the corner, oblivious to the fact that the silver sedan had now pulled into a parking spot directly facing the front entrance, engine still running, exhaust clouds billowing white into the cold desert air. Sarah pretended to organize lottery tickets, her hands moving automatically while her eyes tracked the vehicle through the security monitor mounted above the register. The driver just sat there, motionless, a dark silhouette behind the windshield. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Her phone sat on the counter next to a half-eaten bag of Doritos, and she casually moved her hand toward it, trying to appear natural, trying not to show fear, because predators can smell fear. Her father had taught her that too, back when he was still a sheriff's deputy in Kern County before the accident. The man finally opened his door. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a dark hoodie despite the fact that it wasn't that cold, and he moved with a strange, deliberate slowness that made Sarah's throat tighten. She watched him approach the entrance, his face still hidden in shadow, and her thumb hovered over the 9 on her phone's keypad, ready to call for help if needed. But what would she even say? A customer is walking into the store? Officer, he looks suspicious? That's not enough, she thought. And besides, the nearest police station was 20 minutes away on a good night, and this stretch of Route 9 was notorious for zero cell reception in certain dead zones. The electronic chime sounded as he pushed through the door. Ding ding! And the rush of cold air that followed him carried the smell of cigarette smoke and something else, something metallic that Sarah couldn't quite place. "Evening," she said, forcing her voice to sound steady, casual, like she greeted creepy strangers at 2 in the morning all the time. He didn't respond. He just stood there, 3 feet inside the door, letting it close behind him with a pneumatic hiss. And now she could see his face, or rather the parts of it that weren't obscured by the hood pulled low over his forehead. Pale skin, dark eyes that didn't blink enough, a thin mouth set in a flat line. He was staring at her, not at the shelves, not at the coolers full of beer and energy drinks, just at her. "Can I help you find something?" Sarah asked, and she heard the slight tremor in her voice, despite her best efforts to suppress it. The man tilted his head slightly, like a dog hearing a strange sound, and then, finally, he moved, walking slowly toward the back of the store where the restrooms were located, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. Sarah exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe he was just a weird guy who needed to use the bathroom. People are strange at night. That's just how it is. But then she noticed the security monitor again, the one that showed the parking lot, and her blood turned to ice. There was a second person sitting in the passenger seat of the silver Taurus, a second person, and they were watching the store. Sarah's hand closed around her phone, and she unlocked it with shaking fingers, pulling up her recent calls, finding the number for Jake, the manager who lived 10 minutes away, and had told her to call if anything sketchy happens. I mean it, don't be a hero. But before she could hit dial, she heard the bathroom door creak open, and the man was walking back toward the front of the store, except now he wasn't alone, because another person had entered through the front entrance while she'd been distracted, and this one was shorter, stockier, wearing a denim jacket with frayed sleeves. And oh God, this was planned. "We're gonna need you to open the register," the first man said, his voice flat and emotionless, and now his right hand was pulling something from his hoodie pocket, not a gun, but a knife, a hunting knife with a serrated edge that caught the fluorescent light and gleamed like a promise of violence. The second man moved to block the front door, flipping the lock with a casual flick of his wrist, and Sarah realized with crystal clarity that this wasn't just a robbery. "Take whatever you want," Sarah said, raising her hands slowly, keeping them visible, non-threatening. The register has maybe $300 in it, and there's a safe in the back office, but I don't have the combination. Only the manager does. You can have all of it. I won't call the cops. I won't—" "We don't want the money," the first man interrupted. And those 5 words hit Sarah like a physical blow, because if they didn't want the money, then what did they want? Her mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last, and she thought about the news stories she'd heard about women who worked alone at night, about the ones who were never seen again, about the ones whose bodies were found weeks later in the desert scrubland off Highway 58. The man with the knife took a step closer to the counter, and Sarah took a step back, her spine hitting the cigarette display behind her. "My coworker is in the back room," she lied, the words tumbling out fast and desperate. "He's probably calling the police right now, so if you leave now—" "You're lying," the man said. And he was right. Of course he was right, because there was no coworker. There was never a coworker on the graveyard shift. That's why they paid her extra. That's why she was alone. "Please," Sarah whispered, and she hated the way her voice cracked, hated the way tears were already forming in her eyes, but she couldn't help it because she was 23 years old and she had student loans to pay off and a cat named Chester waiting for her at home, and she didn't want to die in a gas station on Route 9 at 1:47 in the morning. The man smiled, actually smiled, and it was the worst thing Sarah had ever seen. A smile that contained no warmth, no humanity, just cold calculation. But then something changed. A sound cut through the tension, the distinct wail of a police siren in the distance, growing louder, closer, and both men's heads snapped toward the front windows, where red and blue lights were beginning to paint the fog in alternating colors. "Shit," the second man hissed, and he unlocked the front door with fumbling, panicked fingers. The first man pointed the knife at Sarah one more time, his expression twisted with rage and frustration. And for a heartbeat, she thought he might lunge forward anyway, might decide that if he couldn't have what he came for, then he'd at least make sure she suffered. But then he turned, and both men were running, sprinting across the parking lot to their silver Taurus, just as a California Highway Patrol car pulled into the lot with its spotlights blazing. Sarah collapsed against the counter, her legs giving out, and she watched through the window as the patrol car pursued the Taurus out onto Route 9, the red taillights disappearing into the fog. Later, after she'd given her statement to the officer who'd returned to check on her, after she'd called Jake and quit her job effective immediately, after she'd driven home with her hands still shaking on the steering wheel, Sarah would learn that the patrol officer hadn't been responding to a call about the gas station at all, that he'd just been doing a routine sweep of the highway when he'd noticed the suspicious vehicle in the parking lot. Pure chance, dumb luck, 30 seconds either way, and the story would have ended differently. But as Sarah lay in bed that morning, watching the sunrise through her bedroom window and listening to Chester purr beside her, Sarah understood with absolute certainty that some doors once opened can never be fully closed again, and every night shift, every dark parking lot, every stranger's face would now carry the weight of what almost happened on Route 9, a weight she'd carry for the rest of her life, wondering not just who those men were or what they wanted, but how many other women weren't as lucky as she was, how many other gas stations on lonely highways saw endings that never made the news.